Beyond the Basics is back. It's late summer, early fall. We're kind of in that transition time where the air is getting a little bit cooler. College football's underway. People are starting to hunt again, but there's still bass to catch. So we're here with Shane Long, and Shane's going to kind of show us two baits that are great for the transition. One's a real shallow bait, and one's a real deep bait. Shane?
Yeah, they're both square bills. One of them, it's a new creation. It's kind of we got an evolution from the your small square bill that's for your shallow water, lay down stumps, rocks, whatever you're fishing, to now we have one that we can actually hit the bottom in 18 foot of water and still get the same deflection and reaction bites that we get out of the small one shallow.
Mm-hmm. To back up a little bit, Shane, these square bill crankbaits are from Lucky Strike, and they're designed by the legendary square bill guy Rick Clunn. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Rick's got his name on both of them, so he's been in the middle of the the production and and all the testings and everything. The one they call the Freak, that's the deep diver. Him and a couple of guys, they were out in California testing it in some of the lakes out there. I don't know why they went all the way out there, but they did.
Okay. So the RC2 series launched last year, that's correct? And now this year at ICAST, I saw the Freak for the first time. And the idea behind the Freak is that it still kind of has that same deflection as the normal square bill does?
Yep, and it's got a little bit different body design. I can show you one if you.
Yeah, let's take a look. Let's take a look at these.
We got
baits.
one right here. It's got the way they've designed this bait. You still got your square bill. They've flattened the sides on the side of the bait to give it that tight. It's got a pretty tight wiggle to it. Mm-hmm. But the way they've designed this lip is they've cut out, and this is something you won't ever see on a deep diving crankbait, is this lip cut out right here. And what that enables you to do is it don't have the drag. Like if you're throwing the normal deep diving crankbaits and they pull on you all day long, this bait comes through the water real smooth. And it still has a square bill design that you can fish this through a tree, through a brush pile, and it still has the same deflection as what your shallow square bills have.
And you're still looking for that deflection bite. That's too when
absolutely, and that's one of the big keys to a square bill or to a crankbait. It's more of a reaction bite. If you can get that bait to hit something and deflect off of it hard, that's when that fish will come up and get it.
Okay, let's take a look at the RC2 too, the original that Rick designed. This is last year's version.
This is last year's version.
I know a lot of guys have had a lot of success on it. I know Robbie Dodson won an Everstar on it
last fall.
You've had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, this color's called Real Shad. That is, I fish a lot of the White River chain, the clearer lakes, and it just matches the shad just almost perfect. This is the 1.5. It's just a great all-around crankbait. You can throw them shallow on rocks, stumps, laydowns, and it's kind of the four-wheel drive of crankbait. You can throw it wherever you want and wind it through it.
And on this bait, I'm assuming fluorocarbon line?
Yeah, I throw this one on 15.
Okay.
I try to go as heavy as I can on the square bill just because it's more of a reaction bite. And those fish, you're winding them pretty hard. You want to bring them through fast and bring it through at multiple angles on it. If you find a laydown, and a lot of the key is if you find a single laydown on a bare bank, there's a good chance there's a fish on it if you can get him to bite. If you can hit that from different angles and you just wind it hard into them, and that's why I use the heavier line, because most of the time it doesn't matter. It's just a reaction bite. On the other bait, it depends on water depth. If you're wanting to fish, if you're trying to get the bait down to the bottom in, say, over 12 to 15 foot, I drop down to 10-pound line. If you're fishing the 12-foot range, you can throw the 12-pound line on it, and it'll hit the bottom with that real easy.
Talk about it's early fall, like I mentioned, and there's kind of the thermocline is developing, and the rule of thumb is you can kind of fish the thermocline two different ways. You can go real shallow or real deep, and that's kind of what we're showing those two baits today.
Yep.
Tell us why that's so important.
The thermocline is kind of what the fish live by all summer long. When the water gets hot, you have a layer, the top layer of water that has the oxygen in it, and wherever that thermocline will be, a lot of the lakes that we fish, the highland impoundments, it'll be around 30 foot deep on the main lake. And you can usually, a lot of the electronics these days will show you the thermocline, but most of the time when you see the fish and they're 15 foot, or they're all 20 foot, or they're all 30 foot deep. That's usually where that thermocline is. They don't generally go below it.
Okay.
And so those fish are held at that depth all year long. And in the fall, we have what we call a turnover. And that's when the thermocline goes away and the water basically turns over. And the oxygen is just as good in 6 inches of water as it is in 60 foot of water.
Okay.
So those fish, that's whenever the bite gets tough. And a lot of people, think of the fall, the early fall is the transition. That's when it gets tough, and a lot of people struggle, and that's because the fish spread out. And with a crankbait, you can cover a lot more water. You can get in the back of a creek or the pockets, and put your trolling motor on high and just go and just chuck and wind, and you can still catch them fish.
For the shallow water crankbait especially, I've heard Rick talk about the square bill is basically good throughout the entire year, with the exception of when the water's like 50 degrees or colder.
It sure is. And that's one of the things in the summertime. You don't have to wait for a transition. You can fish it all year long. You can get on the rivers, or if you go far enough up an impoundment and you get into the river, the thermocline will actually go away. Wherever there's a lot of current, there won't be a thermocline there. So those fish you'll still catch them shallow, and a lot of these tournaments are won in less than a foot of water on these highland impoundments, and they're won way up a creek, somewhere where they may have to idle a long ways to get up to it, but there's no thermocline up there, and the fish just live shallow all year long.
Bottom line, always have a square bill tied on.
Absolutely. It's a fish catching bait, and they catch them all over the United States, anywhere you want to go.
And we're at a clear impoundment now, and we've tried to kind of run up the river and find some dirtier water, so let's get to work and show these two baits off.
Sounds good to me. This would be your real typical fall after transition pocket. You have the main river right outside the mouth of this pocket. You come in, you have the nice flat banks, and towards the mouth you've got the 45 degree, and it tapers off into your flat banks back here, and this is your typical fall area that you would fish. It's got good structure, your boat docks. This is an area that the fish could push the bait fish back in the back, and a lot of times you see a lot of schooling activities in the back of these pockets like this in the fall. Most of the time, especially with the square bill, you're targeting fish that are, they're in less than 6 foot of water. They may be on a stump or a laydown that extends out into the water. So yeah, most of the time I try to keep the boat fairly close to the bank, and you're just covering a lot of water. Where depending on the bank, sometimes you may just be in 2 foot of water with the boat. Sometimes it may be as deep as 5 or 6. But you're just trying to cover water with it, and just try to get that reaction bite. There's a fish right there. A little spotted bass. That's not a very big one, but they do catch fish. When you're fishing these square bills up shallow, don't ever hesitate to throw it right in the middle of the trees, because if that's where the fish live, you want to throw it right there where he lives, and that's one of the big keys, is to get this bait to deflect off of the limbs and whatever structure you have there to get that reaction bite. So you don't want to not throw it at something just because you're afraid that it might get hung up, because that is actually one of its design. That is one of the features in the way it is designed, is to deflect off of cover instead of hanging in it. Sometimes they want it, you may have to change your retrieve. Usually, it's always a fast retrieve is usually 99% of the time is always best on a square bill. The faster you can burn it, the better. You cannot reel this bait fast enough to keep a fish from getting it. I'm throwing on a high-speed reel, and you cannot reel it fast enough to keep a fish from getting it. So you just want to reel it hard and get it, get that reaction strike. Sometimes they want it when it hits a piece of structure. You might want to pause it for just a second and then take off again, and that will get the fish, to react. It's just, and sometimes it changes hourly. You may have to adjust to whatever the fish are wanting at that time. There's another one. About the same size. Little bitty guy. They're just big enough to get a hook in you. Why couldn't that have been a 4-pounder? Yeah, this is one of our new creations. We call it this is the Freak. We're sitting in a boat out here in 25 foot of water. There's a point that runs out right here. We've got fish that are working bait fish down here in that 16, 18 foot of water. And this is a perfect bait for getting down to that depth. And it's still your square bill design, so you still get that same reaction strike. And you know, one of the keys to this bait, you throw it on a little bit lighter line, you know, 10 or 12 pound test, depending on how deep you want to get it down. And you make as long a cast as possible. That way you can get the maximum depth out of this. And if you get a long enough cast out of this bait, you can hit the bottom in 18 foot of water with a square bill crankbait. And that's something that, you know, nobody has ever been able to do up to this point. In the fall, Lucky Strike USA has you covered from deep water. This is the Freak, to shallow water with the RC square bill. They're very reasonably priced, very good hardware and components. My name is Shane Long. I'm the American National Insurance Pro, and this is Beyond the Basics.